Greetings, unique and beautiful Earthlings. This is Justine Baricar, and with me today are my colleagues, Manilyn Casas and Gwyneth Alejandro. And together, we will learn and explore the world of prehistoric and Egyptian art history. Art involves poetry, music, dance, and material arts such as painting, sculpture, drawing, pottery, and body adornment as the consequence of anthropogenic creativity and imagination. And with new technology, research techniques, and archaeological findings, we can now be more informed than ever on the history of human artistic achievement, beginning with prehistoric art and its components and historical significance. It is an encyclopedic undertaking to describe the global roots of the creative achievement of human beings upon which the subsequent history of art can be laid. Prehistoric art. In the time before the advent of formal writing and when human societies were migrating and extending around the world, these arts were all developed. For this span of time, art history ranges from 20,000 to 8,000 BC with various examples of prehistoric art from all over the world and present to illustrate them. In this period, the earliest human occupation takes place, and it is then that art that includes examples of geometric and animal depictions graved and painted on stone to have originated. The first drawings were paintings on a cave. The walls of protected caves were painted by early humans with paint made from dirt or charcoal mixed with spit or animal fat. Historians hypothesize that brushing, smearing, dabbing, and spraying methods were used to apply paint. The iron oxides dug right out of the ground in the form of lumps were likely rich in clay, which historians conclude that on the natural stone hollows of the cave, the lumps were ground into a fine powder. Prehistoric art. It is significant because it serves as the best way to present the relationship between our primitive ancestors and the world as they regard it. These men predominantly painted animals or carved animals that they most probably hunted as a primary food source, leaving behind traces of their actions in doing so. Prehistoric art is comprised into three periods, namely Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic eras. In general, and prehistoric art in specific, all we have able to shine a light on Stone Age culture is ambiguous rubble, chipped and polished stones, broken shards, decorated and fashioned bones, and tomb skeletons, or the scanty buried remains of ancient men, rock panels decorated with painted or etched figures, and finally, funerary temples and destroyed worship places and fortified sites. This period is historically divided into three subsections: the Lower Paleolithic, the Middle Paleolithic, and the Upper Paleolithic, each marking progress among different human cultures, particularly tool technology. Paleolithic man in turn existed exclusively by hunting and gathering. With the spectacular painted caves, the record of Paleolithic art is wonderfully illuminated, and hundreds of sculptures and engravings have been found portraying humans, animals, and fascinating creatures. This is the Paleolithic Age's earliest era. It stretches from the first appearance of man as a mammal tool-making to the emergence of significant developments in evolution and technology that marked the beginning of the Middle Paleolithic. In a way, the art of this era, the main type of artistic human expression, was embodied by stone tools. The second stage of the Paleolithic era is the Middle Paleolithic Period. This was not a time of great innovation. For example, simple hand axes were still regularly used, but substantial changes were made in the basic tool-making process and in the variety and proper use of crafted tools. The last and shortest phase of the Paleolithic era is the Upper Paleolithic, less than 15% of the duration of the subsequent Middle Paleolithic. Upper Paleolithic culture created the first ubiquitous emergence of human painting and sculpture, which occurred simultaneously in almost every part of the world, in addition to more advanced instruments and a more refined way of life. Whether the prehistoric artworks displayed here are representations of a unified artistic idiom shared by humanity or instead are unique to the ecosystems, cultures, and humans that created them is an open question for consideration. Nonetheless, some of the earliest manifestations of the imaginative and artistic abilities of humans are characterized impeccably by each work or site.
The Mesolithic period or the Middle Stone Age, this is the Old World archaeological period between the Upper Paleolithic and the Neolithic era, or other known as the Transitional Era. It is sometimes called as Epipaleolithic, and during this period, it has the characteristic of both ages, the Paleolithic and the Neolithic era. Painters and engravers tended to focus on humans, usually a group of humans, who engage in hunting, dancing, and other various rituals, as well as their everyday activities. Their arts was more on pottery, cave paintings and engravings, small sculptural artifacts, and early megalithic architecture. The term Neolithic period refers to the last stage of the Stone Age. This period was also significant for its megalithic architecture, which is the spreading of agricultural practices and the use of polished stone tools among all people. It is also when humans started engaging in agriculture like farmings. Arts from this period was more waving, architecture, megaliths, and increasingly stylized spectrograph. Ancient Egyptian art refers to art that being produced in ancient Egypt between the 31st century BC or before Christ and the 4th century AD or Anno Domini. It includes paintings, sculptures, drawings on papyrus, faience, jewelry, ivories, architecture, and other art media. It is also very conservative because the art style changed very little over time. In the time of Egyptian art, it reached considerable sophistication in painting and sculpture, and was both highly stylized and symbolic. Its characteristic was highly precise. Much of the surviving art comes from tombs and monuments, hence the emphasis of life after death and the preservation of knowledge of the past. So after this, we will dig more deeper about the ancient Egyptian art. The ancient Egyptian arts is based on perfect balance because it reflects the ideal world of the gods. The same way these gods provided all good gifts for humanity. So the artwork was imagined and created to provide a use. So the time when ancient Egyptian art was proclaimed, it portrayed a lot more on idealized, unrealistic concept of the world. Their arts was more on architecture, sculpture, painting, metalwork, pyramids, and goldsmithing. The materials that they used was more on harder stone, includes quartzite, diorite, granite, basalt, and many more. And if they are done using copper chisels and stone reefs, they use carving on softer stones. The Predynastic period in ancient Egypt is the time before recorded in the history, from the Paleolithic down to the Neolithic age, and on to the rise of the first dynasty. In the 6th millennium BCE, there began to emerge patterns of civilization that display the characteristic which deserve to be called Egyptian. In addition for that, Predynastic civilization was developed in a steadily manner. So when it comes to their artworks, it best describes the ranges of visual imagery and ornamental forms. Usually, the type of arts that the Predynastic period was related to a figural and non-figural designs that were often applied to functional objects. The surviving corpus of Predynastic art represents only a fraction of what was produced. Little can be said, for instance, about the decorative design that were undoubtedly applied to the bodies of people and animals. Many of the common aesthetic practices of Egyptian art and architecture were formalized during this era. As Egyptian society grew and advanced rapidly, toward refined civilization. Much of Egyptian art revolved around the theme of permanence, from large architectural structures to writing and imagery of the afterlife. Artists endeavored to preserve everything from the present as clearly and permanently as possible. It is known as the Age of the Pyramids or the Age of the Pyramid Builders. The Old Kingdom period is most famous for building pyramids. These include the First Pyramid, the Pyramid of Doher, and the largest pyramid, the Great Pyramid at Giza. It was also characterized by revolutionary advancement in architecture. When it comes to its characteristics, it encompasses the reigns of the Great Pyramid builders of the 4th dynasty, such as Kings Nefero and the Kings Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. Its type of art are mostly statues, carvings, and temple paintings. The first intermediate period, it is characterized as a time of chaos and darkness. It is believed that during this time, the temples were pillaged and violated. Their existing artwork was vandalized, and the statues of kings were broken or destroyed as a result of this alleged political chaos. These two kingdoms would eventually come into conflict, with the Theban kings conquering the north, resulting in reunification of Egypt under a single ruler during the second part of the 11th dynasty. Objects that being produced in this time was only for the tomb. It is usually sculpture, pottery, and funerary items. Artworks that are also produced were stela of the gatekeeper vase in the form of a bird, limestone stela featuring women, and statue of the steward meat.
Middle Kingdom. This is known as a period of reunification, wherein all the things that has happened during the first intermediate period united again. The Middle Kingdom designates a period of ancient Egyptian civilization stretching from approximately 2030 to 1650 before Christ, probably the Dynasty 11 through the Dynasty 13. During this era, the cultural principles set out at the beginning of Egyptian civilization and codified during the Old Kingdom were reimagined, including the ideology of kingship, the organization of society, religious practices, afterlife beliefs, and relations with neighboring people. This usually regarded as the high point of Egyptian culture. Common people are being featured more often in art rather than the nobilities. These transformations are attested to in architecture, sculpture, painting, relief decorations, stelae, jewelry, personal possessions, and literature. Second Intermediate Period. The Second Intermediate Period marks a period when ancient Egypt fell into disarray for a second time between the end of the Middle Kingdom and the start of the New Kingdom. This period is often characterized as disorganized and chaotic because the art of the Second Intermediate Period of Egypt continued the traditions of the Middle Kingdom but often less effectively. Their types of artwork was usually tomb paintings, statuary, temple reliefs, pictorials, pottery, and jewelry. New Kingdom. This is the most famous era of Egyptian history with the best-known rulers and most recognizable artwork. Temples were one of the main architectural innovations of the New Kingdom. They were the most important buildings in ancient Egypt. Cities like Amarna were built around a central temple, with roads radiating outwards. So when it comes to their types of artworks, it includes metalworks, monuments, temples, and statues, as well as this sculpture. Third Intermediate Period. This period was one of decline and political instability, coinciding with the late Bronze Age collapse of civilization in the ancient Near East and Eastern Mediterranean, including the Greek Dark Ages. In the Third Intermediate Period of Egypt, power was held almost equally between Tanis and Thebes early on. The two cities ruled jointly even though they often had quite different agendas. It was also marked by divisions of the state for much of the period, conquest and rule by foreigners. This period types of arts are sculpture, carving, and painting. Late Kingdom. This is also known as the Fifth Age in Egypt. It refers to the last flowering of native Egyptian rulers after the Third Intermediate Period. The late period was an era of great achievement and saw a renewal of Egyptian nationalism and pride in their attempts to throw off Persian ruler and regain autonomy. The most notable feature of the art during this period is the diversity of religious practices. They're known for their artworks in sculpture, painting, figurines, and amulets. We have finally arrived where we began, but before we will end this presentation, we would like to leave a quotation by Robert Heinlein. A generation which ignores history has no past and no future. Have a good day, and let's always remember what we've learned.